So here in yesterday's class, we discussed about Java data types. So what is a data type in a simplest meaning? It is a place. So in a technical term, it's a memory allocation. It's a memory to store data or value. And when it comes to Java data types, so there are 9 types that we discussed, out of which there are primitive, and for our understanding we discuss this as fixed size, and there is non-primitive, and then they are varying size. Correct? This is what we discussed in yesterday's class. Then in primitive, so there are 8 predefined primitive data types in Java. So if you remember the order, so it is easy to remember the memory size if you remember the order. So for that, byte, then short, and int, long. So these are the first 4, and we discussed about their size also. Byte will consume 1 byte of memory, and short will consume 2 bytes of memory. Int consumes 4 bytes, and long consumes 8 bytes. And the purpose of these 4 is used to store numbers. I mean non-decimal numbers or plain numbers. Then along with these, there is float and double. And these two, float will consume 4 bytes of memory and double will consume 8 bytes of memory. The purpose is to store decimal, fractional, or rational numbers. All are same. Then along with these 6, so there is one more type called char, which consumes 2 bytes of memory, and the purpose of it is to store any single character that is present on the keyboard. Any single character. Then the last one, so we have a boolean, and in Java programming language will type it as a boolean. If you know other programming language like Python, there will type only bool, but here boolean, and which consumes 1 bit of memory. So the purpose of this is to store true or false kind of data. So these are 8 primitives which we discussed, and also there is one non-primitive called as string. In this list, there is a class, object, enumeration, and all those things are there. But at this point of time, I'm not discussing about that. Only about string we are going to discuss. And another point which we already discussed is whenever we are using this in our Java program, so these must be used in lowercase letters only with the same spelling. So char, we type char only, it's not character. And when it comes to non-primitive string, we didn't use yet, but S has to be capital. So that's what it's a predefined thing. Yeah. And then followed by, we discussed about the examples of how do we use this byte short int, which is recommended and which is for developers or programmers comfort. And we have seen the modification also. So till this point we discussed in our yesterday's class. Yeah. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. If not, we'll continue. Online, please respond through chat. If you have any questions, you can type the question. If there is no questions, please type no. So that I'll be understand you are there with me. No, thank you. Thank you, Vamshi and Teja. Parvati, any questions, please? Yeah. So after this, we discussed about the syntax, and based on this syntax only, we have used the first 3, that is byte short int. What is the syntax? If you remember, data type, then space, variable name, and here I'm going to put this variable name in angular brackets. So from now onwards, if I write something in angular brackets, it means it's a programmer choice. we have to give the names. So for that, we have to follow certain standards and certain rules as well. Okay. The next assignment operator called equal to symbol, the data or the value, then ends with semicolon. This is the syntax and a generalized syntax. And for byte short int, there is no difference from the syntax to the usage of them. Then to continue from there, let us discuss about the long. The long data type will consume 8 bytes of memory. And then what's the purpose of this long? It is also used to store the numbers. The purpose is to store numbers only. Then with the help of this syntax, let us use the long. So here, in place of data type, I'm writing long in lowercase letters, then a variable name of programmer choice. Say A equals the data I'm going to store 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then ends with semicolon. This is my example. Then one more example, say long B equals the data which I'm going to use this time 1 to 9, then followed by I'm adding one more digit, say 1. So previously in the first example there are 9 digits in the data or value part. So in the B variable there are 10 digits in the data or value part. So if you have any idea, are these two syntactically correct or anything is incorrect? Yeah, any idea in this? Yeah, the first one is syntactically correct, but second one is syntactically incorrect. There is an error in this. The error is, so when a programmer is trying to store less than or equal to 9-digit value, when a program is trying to store a less than or equal to 9-digit value, that means in the data, if you are using up to 9 digits, then using capital L or small l is optional. Even if we don't use also, syntactically it's correct in Java. But when programmer is trying to store a data of equals to 10 or greater than 10, then in this scenario, if the data is of 10-digit value or 10-digit data, then L capital or L small, any one only is mandatory. So what is the correction? So here we have to use L at the last, before semicolon, after the digit. So this is the difference in the syntax from general syntax to the long type. For byte short int, there is no such variation. But when it comes to long, so this is the rule which we have to remember. I'll execute and show you all these things once the discussion is over. But as of now, just remember, this is the property for long which you have to remember. Yeah. So generally, 10 digits means what is the type of data that we'll use in our day-to-day life? Our mobile numbers, bank account numbers. So these are mostly of more than 10 digits. Yeah, Aadhaar number. So all these things are not possible to store by using the previous types like integer and all. So therefore, there is a difference when we should go for long, when the data is bit higher or the values are bit long higher, then we have to go for the long type. Why we should not go for every time a long? Because when JVM execute this first line, as we discussed in yesterday's class, in the memory or in the RAM, how much memory allocation will happen? It is because of long type, because of this long, and long consumes 8 bytes of memory. Therefore, in memory, 8 bytes will be allocated. And with a variable name called A, the value will be stored as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is what will happen in the memory. That's why So over int, if you are using long always, then syntactically we have to add one thing, and memory wise also it takes 4 bytes more. That's why we will not use long until unless a specific requirement is there. Then how do you see the values output? So we all know that print statement. So from now onwards, system.out.println, I'm going to write this short form for writing purpose. So this is not a correct way to write in your any handwritten coding test and all, but for me to just keep it short and simple, so I'm going to use this approach from now onwards. No confusions, please. And here we can use a as a variable, and system.out.println we can use b as a variable. Then we are going to get its appropriate value as output. In the first scenario, we know that the value will be 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 9. But in second scenario, do we get this L also in the part of output or no? No, it is just a part of syntax only. L is not part of value, it's a part of syntax. That's why we don't get in the output part. So this is about the long pipe. If you have any questions, please. Parvati, I didn't get the response from you. Are you there in the meeting? Yeah, that's fine. Please respond when I ask something so that I'll come to know that you are following the class. Yeah. So any questions from byte, short, int, long, please, anybody? That's good. Any questions? No. Then here I have a question. The question is, why we have 4 byte, short, int, long to store numeric type of data or non-decimal type of data? Why we have 4? Can't we use one only?
Data types like there is like we can use age that is small number, where we can use
Yeah. So exactly here I got answer from offline student. The answer I got is, whenever we are using this byte or short or int or long, the difference is like so there is a range of data, like we discussed. If you remember, when I connect to the real life examples, by using a small container like a small 1 liter bottle, so we can store up to what, up to 1 liter of liquid only. Can we store beyond that? No. Can we store smaller than that? Yes. Equals to 1 liter or less than 1 liter is possible. Similarly here also, there is a limitation for byte. It can't store more than certain data or certain value. So how much is that? So for that, there is a process to calculate, and there is a Eclipse line of syntax to get the minimum value and maximum value that we can store by using a byte. So since it is a doubt, then let me clarify. So with the help of the memory table, we can get it. And it is important for a programmer to remember the minimum and maximum values of byte out of these 8 primitives. So as of now, we completed only 4. So here we have to remember. So for this, byte will consume 1 byte of memory. 1 byte is equals how many bits? 8 bits. Then to get the minimum value that we can store by using this byte type, so there is a formula which we can use for only these 4. The formula is negative 2 to the power of n minus 1. This is the minimum value. Then at the same time, what's the maximum value? The maximum value is positive. Of course, it's 2 power n minus 1. Then from this entire result, subtract one value. So by using this, we can get a minimum and maximum. So only for first one I'll explain. Then through Eclipse, I'll show you all the 4. Yeah. So that is What is this n? N in terms of bits. This n is nothing but in terms of bits we have to use. That is minus 2 to the power of, so byte is how many bits? The byte will consume 1 byte, which is equals to 8 bits. So this 8 we have to use in place of that, then 8 minus 1. So minus 2 to the power of 7, that is 2 power 7, 2 into 2 into 2, which will be multiplied by 7 times. So this gives the answer as minus 128. Then the simplest conclusion, by using byte data type, the minimum value that we can store is minus 128. And what's maximum value? This is 128, then minus 1. That is plus 127 is the maximum value that we can store for byte data type. That's the capacity of this byte. It can't store less than minus 128. It can't store more than 127. That's a limitation for byte. Like this is what we follow in real life also. If you want to get some small quantity, we'll go with a small bag. If you want to get some bigger quantity, we will go with a big bag, right? So for a smaller quantity, can we go with a big container? It's unnecessary. Same thing here also in programming language. So if you want to store some small data, then use the byte is recommended because it consumes less memory. So with this understanding, so what is this short? We can write it as minus 30,767 and as a minimum value for short, and then so here 768, I'm sorry, and here plus 32,767. How do we get it? The same formula we have to apply. Similarly for int also, even I didn't remember, but it is minus 2 billion. Minus 2 billion. It's a 10-digit number. It starts with minus 2. And it is a plus 2 billion. One less than the minimum value. And long, even it's a very huge number. So these are the ranges of this first 4 data types. So then why we should use only byte, or when we should use byte, or when we should use short and all, it is based on this information, and it depends on the requirement as well. Yeah, am I clear with this? All of you, any questions in this? It is not just my answer. Even we can get the values of minimum and maximum for all these types when through Eclipse also, as I said, we'll execute through Eclipse. Yeah, so let me show that as well. So for this, I'm back to Eclipse, or yesterday's project called data type, and inside this there is a src and package. We have a class name called a sample.java file, so that I am opening, and we discussed about the int and all in the same file. I'll just double click on this so that we can see only the class area. So then followed by, let us discuss first about the long type. Yeah, so this is a long, then some AB already used, age is also already used, so we can't reuse the existing variable name. So I'm using X is a variable name, and I have given you first example like 1 to 9 I'm storing. Are we getting any error here? No, because it's up to 9-digit number. By using long, it is optional to use L at the last. But now you observe, I'm going to use the long type with a different variable name called Y, and this time I'm using a 10-digit number. So at the last I'm adding 1 again. I end with semicolon. Is it accepted? Yeah. So I'll add 1 more digit. Is it accepted? No. So what's the reason? The reason is when we are going beyond the 10-digit value, then we must use L at the last. Beyond the 10-digit value, we have to use L at the last. Okay. Which L? It can be capital L or it can be small l also. So here I am using a small l, but which looks like a 1. So to avoid that ambiguity or confusion, it's recommended to go for capital L, so that the understanding of the same code by same programmer or a new programmer will be very clear. So I have used the print statement to print this x and y values. Let us execute to see the last two outputs. So I'm using a keyboard shortcut. So you can see L is not a part of the output. It is only the part of a syntax. Up to 11 we are getting in the output in the console. So this is about the long type. So after discussing all these four, then I put a question of which one to use when. That is depends on the values. Then how do we come to know what is the minimum and maximum values of all those? So I'm using a print function to directly print it. So first I'm using byte with B capital, no confusions. Then here minimum value I'm using byte dot min underscore value is a syntax, and similarly again I'm using one more print function. Inside that byte dot max value I'm using. Now let me save, and the last two lines of print function output we have to observe. So here you can see the same thing. Minus 128 is the minimum value of byte type, and a plus 127 is maximum value of byte type. In some of the multiple choice questions, to confuse us, or maybe after learning the entire Java, we may forget this simple point. So they'll be giving some byte b equals to 200, and they'll ask us to print b what's output. So we tend to go for the output as 200, but it is out of the range of the byte, which will not be accepted. Which will not be accepted. So let us see. So byte sum b1 equals, I'm trying to store 200 using byte. You observe? Immediately we are getting a syntax error. What's the correction? It is suggesting us to correct to type mismatch, convert to int type is what is suggesting. Okay. Instead of changing the value, it is Eclipse is suggesting us change this to int type is the suggestion. But what is our understanding? It is beyond the range of byte capacity, so we can't go for it. So I'm using 128. Is it possible? No. 127 is a possible. Now you can see there is no error. Similarly, negative 127 if I use, possible? Yes. Negative 129, possible? No, it's also beyond the range. We can use any values in between, like minus 100, then minus plus 100, 1, 2, 3, all those things are possible. Any value in between minus 128 to plus 127 is possible. Beyond that, it's not possible. Yeah. Then if you ask me, how do we get the remaining values as a minimum and maximum? Then this is for byte. I am using a commented line. So byte range. Then the same way, we can go for a short. Comment lines will not be executed by JVM. So it is just only for programmers to understand what the next lines are going to do. Again, I'm using the print function. So here, short with S capital dot min value, min underscore value, then followed by one more print function to see the output. And inside that, short with S capital here, dot max value. I'm sorry. Now let me save it. Let me execute it. I gave minus 32,768 and plus 32,767. This is the range of short. Yeah. So let me copy these two lines. And in the next part, let me go for integer. So then here I'm pasting the same thing. In place of short, I have to use integer here. It's not int. Okay, to get the minimum and maximum values, please observe I'm using capital letters for B capital, S capital, int, not int. It's integer complete spelling. Okay, now let me save and let me execute by keyboard shortcut. So you can see minus 2 billion is the value, which is a 10-digit number. Minus 2 billion, which is a 10-digit number. Our Indian mobile number starts with what? 9 or 8 or 7 or maybe 6 nowadays, or 5 also. So therefore, It is within the range of int or out of the range of int? Out of the range of int. Therefore, mobile numbers are not even possible to store by using a int type. We must go for long type only. Then the last part, let us see the range of long. So here I am pasting the same thing, but in place of the short, I'll use long with L capital. And here also I'll use long with L capital. Save it and execute it. We can see this is the range of the long value. Such a big number, we can't even read it. So these are the ranges of the first four types. So therefore, based on the requirement, we have to use it. Is recommended because less memory consumption. As we already discussed, over recommendation, we go for comfort up to integers. And for long, it is we must go for long only. There is no other option. Am I clear with this? Or anyone has any questions, please? This syntax of getting the minimum and maximum, you have to remember, because once we move to array programs, these values, these things are required. There, I'll give you some practice question on that. You'll understand what's the significance of this, but I suggest you to remember. So then followed by, after the first four, the next one which we have to discuss is float. Then we also have a double. So what is the capacity of this float? Float data type will consume 4 bytes of memory. Yeah, online, if meeting ends, please use the same link to join back. Within a minute, we can continue. And a double will consume 8 bytes of memory. Correct? What's the purpose of these two? These two are used to store decimal values. Then here is a difference in syntax. So in this scenario, if you are using the float type in place of data type as float, everything lowercase letters, then a variable name of programmer choice, I'm using f1 equals a value say 3.14. Then similarly, I'm comparing for better understanding or to remember better, I'm using double, then say d1 equals, so here also I'm going to use the same value called as 3.14. So out of these two, is the syntaxes are right? If you have any idea, or these two are syntactically correct or wrong? Wrong, or anything is wrong? Yeah. So then I didn't conclude. I'll give one more example, then we'll go for the conclusion. I'm using float f2 equals a value 100. Then here I'm using double d2, a value called 100 again. When are these two are correct? F2 and d2 are correct? No. Okay. So here is one important conclusion to remember. So when we are using a float type, I repeat, when you are using a float type, if the data is decimal, then using small f or capital F, any one, is mandatory. If data is float, the data is okay, data type and the value I don't want to mix up, so I'll write clearly. If data is decimal, then using f capital or f small is mandatory for float. But in the second scenario, is the data is decimal or non-decimal? Non-decimal. So here using f capital or f small, small or capital, then this is optional. Yeah, I know that you may have one more doubt. When it comes to double, So double, it is not a mandate to use D capital or D small in first scenario or in second scenario also. This is optional only. For both the scenarios, it is optional in Java. Even the decimal data or non-decimal data, it is optional. Then I understand your question. The question is, why float is used to store this 100? So for that already we have byte short int long, no? Why float is there? So for that the answer is, whenever we are performing the additions or some mathematical transactions of a plain number, then followed by some decimal number, then this has to be allowed, right? To allow such type of things. So one is a float value, another one is a integer value, but we are going to get result of float only. So to support such type of simple mathematical operations, so even float also supports to store plain numbers. And there is one more difference. What the difference is, if you are using this print function to print f1 variable data, so what's output we are going to get? It's going to get 3.14. F is a part of syntax. But in the second scenario, if you use f2 to print it, so this is the floating type of answer which you are going to get. So even though it's a plain number, but we are going to get a decimal 0.0. That's the difference when we use int and when we use float. Then here, same thing. If you use d1 and d2, same way we are going to get. So first let me write d1, which is going to give output of 3.14. Then second, if you are going to use d2, which is going to give output of 100.0. So this is about float and double. Is it understood or any questions? Understood? Yeah. So then followed by what, when we should go for this float and when we should go for double. What's the range of it? So for that, Eclipse based output I cannot show for this, like we have shown, I have shown for byte short int long, but here I can give you the information. When it comes to float, the minimum and the maximum value that we can store is plus or minus 10 to the power of 37, where plus is for maximum, minus is for minimum. It means whenever we are using this float, after decimal, we can store up to 37 digits. We can store up to. And the same thing, when we see in the output part, there is something called as a precision, or we call it as adjustment in our simplest terms. So we get up to some 15 to 17 decimals in the output. In output, the 37 digit value will be adjusted to 15 to 17 digits only. Similarly, when it comes to double, the min and max values are plus or minus 10 to the power of something like 319. I may be little bit difference here, but it's up to some 300 digits we can store. So here in the decimal part, we can store up to 300 digits. So here again, so the precision when it comes to output, it is 37 to 39 digits is a part of output that we are going to get when we use such a big number in output or in precision. So we are going to get up to decimal part as some 37 to some 39 digits. So this is just completely additional knowledge for you. Just if you remember, it's better. If not, you can just ignore. Yeah. And there is one more reason. So do we use in our real life anything as 37 digits, 37 digit value? No. Then why Java people have supported something like float and double, where we can store some 30 digits or 300 digits and all? What could be the reason for them to have a data type called as double which stores 300 digits. Exactly. So this R will be used as to find the distance between the planets, where it is a very huge distance, depth of the oceans. Yeah, so such a type of calculations, when it comes to any scientific calculations, then that is where it will be used as double. The more the number of decimals, the more the accuracy or the precision. That's what we used in scientific calculation purpose mostly. Being a programmer, we use only float. We rarely use double. Yeah, so this is about the story of the float and double types. Any questions? Online guys, any questions here?